Welcome to Sinister Truths, the channel where dark history, hidden stories, and unsettling realities come to light. Before we begin, let us know in the comments which country you're watching from and what time of day it is for you. And make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a chilling story. Virginia had always lived in a sleepy corner of the South, a place where the sprawling plantations seemed to stretch endlessly under the heavy sun. The fields of cotton were as white as snow in the summer light, and the air carried the scent of earth and toil. It was 1828, and slavery was as much a part of the landscape as the moss-draped oaks that lined the property. For most people in the area, life was predictable. The wealthy planters lived in grand houses, their lives cushioned by servants and wealth, while the enslaved worked from dawn until dusk, their bodies worn and their spirits subdued. Virginia Thornton was different from most. Though she was the daughter of a well-to-do planter, she had always been unusually curious. From the moment she could walk through the fields alongside her nursemaid, she observed every detail, the way the slaves whispered to one another, the subtle hierarchy among them, and the children who often played quietly, their eyes alert and expressive even in the shadow of oppression. Her mother had long dismissed her questions about the enslaved families with a curt, "You'll understand when you are older." But Virginia never did wait. She watched, she listened, and she began to notice patterns others ignored. It began one sweltering afternoon when Virginia wandered beyond the usual boundaries of the plantation's quarters. She had always been drawn to the children, especially the infants, whose cries and laughter seemed so innocent against the backdrop of the laborious life around them. That day, she noticed something remarkable. In a small cabin near the back of the property, a nursemaid was cradling a baby with striking emerald-green eyes. The child's skin was unusually fair, and golden locks of hair glinted in the sunlight. Virginia blinked, certain she must be mistaken. She had seen fair-skinned children among the enslaved before, but the combination of the vivid eyes and pale hair was unlike anything she had encountered. Her curiosity piqued. Virginia returned to the cabin repeatedly over the next few weeks, observing the infant from a discreet distance. She noticed that the baby's behavior was different too, alert, unusually calm, almost as if the child carried an intelligence that belied its age. Then one day, another baby was born to the same family. Virginia could hardly believe her eyes when she saw the newborn. Again, the same unusual combination of emerald eyes and golden hair. A chill ran down her spine. There was a pattern here, something extraordinary that no one else seemed to notice. Word traveled slowly on the plantation, and Virginia realized she needed to investigate carefully. Asking directly would be dangerous, both socially and morally. The slaves' lives were tightly controlled, and any hint of impropriety or suspicion could have severe consequences. So she began quietly speaking with the mothers in the quarters, pretending to show interest in the well-being of their children. Bit by bit she pieced together a startling truth. Over the span of several years, numerous children had been born with the same distinctive features: emerald eyes, fair skin, and golden or light brown hair. Each of them could trace their lineage to one man, a master of the plantation who was long rumored to have taken liberties with the enslaved women under his care. Virginia's mind raced with the implications. It was scandalous, of course, but it was also deeply tragic. The father, whose power was absolute on the plantation, had left a trail of children whose lives were quietly marked by their difference. They were not fully accepted in the quarters due to their unusual appearance, and yet they were not integrated into the planter's family either. They existed in a liminal space, visible but invisible, acknowledged only through the eyes of the woman who now saw the truth with unwavering clarity. The more Virginia investigated, the more she realized that these children were not anomalies or exide. There was an undeniable pattern: one father, many children, and a secret that the family had worked to obscure for years. Plantation records were kept meticulously, but they never mentioned the full truth. Birth dates were recorded, mothers' names were noted, but the fathers' identities were either omitted or falsely attributed. Virginia spent hours poring over ledgers, birth logs, and correspondence, matching names and dates, connecting dots that others either overlooked or deliberately ignored. The evidence was overwhelming. Yet, despite her excitement at the discovery, Virginia felt a growing sense of dread. The truth she had uncovered was dangerous. If the planters discovered that she knew the story, her life could be imperiled. Worse, the children themselves might suffer consequences if their unique lineage was exposed. They were already treated with suspicion by others on the plantation, their appearance making them objects of curiosity and sometimes envy. Revealing the secret publicly could have devastating consequences. But Virginia could not stop. She felt an almost moral obligation to document what she had seen. She began keeping a journal in secret, meticulously recording the features of each child, the circumstances of their birth, and any hints of their father's involvement. She also noted how the children grew, how they were treated by the other enslaved people, and how they interacted with the household. Some were timid, withdrawn, perhaps sensing the difference in themselves, while others were bold and bright, their intelligence shining despite the harsh conditions surrounding them. Her journal soon became a carefully crafted narrative, blending observation with empathy. She described the infants in loving detail, the way one child's golden hair caught the sunlight, the intensity of another's emerald gaze, the surprising musicality of their laughter. She wrote about the sorrow she witnessed, the longing in their eyes, and the subtle ways in which they tried to assert their identity despite the limitations imposed by the plantation system. Through her writings, the children became real in a way they might not have been otherwise. She gave them names in her journal, not the names assigned to them officially, but ones that captured their spirit and individuality. As she documented the pattern, Virginia also noted the reactions of the women who had borne these children. There was a mixture of resignation and quiet defiance, a complex tapestry of emotions that spoke to the resilience of those enslaved under the planters' authority. The mothers were protective, wary of anyone who might exploit or judge their children. Yet there was also a sense of pride that their offspring possessed something remarkable, something that marked them apart in a world designed to erase their humanity. Virginia's empathy grew with each encounter. She understood that these women were navigating impossible circumstances, and that the legacy of the father's actions was both a curse and in some ways a testament to their endurance. One evening, Virginia made a discovery that shook her to her core. She had been observing the eldest of these children, a boy named Samuel, in her journal, who was now about 7 years old. Samuel had a natural curiosity that mirrored her own. He was always asking questions, examining objects with intense scrutiny, and showing a precocious understanding of the world around him. Virginia realized that Samuel and his siblings were not just remarkable in appearance, they were gifted in mind and spirit as well. Their intelligence, combined with their unique physical traits, made them almost otherworldly in the eyes of those who had grown accustomed to ordinary patterns on the plantation. Her fascination deepened, but so did her concern. The planters were unlikely to view these traits with admiration. There was a rigid social hierarchy, and deviation from the norm was often met with suspicion, fear, or outrage. Cruelty. Virginia feared that the children would be punished or exploited if their uniqueness was revealed. She also worried about the psychological burden they carried, the knowledge, even implicit, that their existence was the product of exploitation. Her compassion compelled her to act, but she was still a child herself, and the options were limited. In time, Virginia developed a quiet routine. She visited the quarters each day, spending hours observing, talking, and occasionally playing with the children under the pretext of leisure. She brought small gifts, a carved wooden toy for one, a piece of fruit for another, always mindful of how these gestures might be perceived. She began to teach them letters and numbers, rudimentary skills that were forbidden for the enslaved to learn. Slowly, she nurtured a secret world of learning and understanding, a safe space where the children could be themselves, even if only for brief moments. Yet, even as she cultivated this hidden sanctuary, Virginia knew that the truth of their lineage could not remain hidden forever. The father's reputation was such that gossip was inevitable. She overheard whispers in the household, hushed remarks that hinted at suspicion or knowledge among the servants. Each whisper heightened the urgency to protect the children, to shield them from the consequences of a truth that society would never accept. The more she learned, the more she realized the precariousness of their situation. Despite the danger, Virginia's curiosity and compassion would not allow her to turn away. She became a careful chronicler of history, even as it unfolded around her. Every new child born with emerald eyes and golden hair was meticulously documented in her secret journal. She recorded their births, their features, their growth, and the subtle signs of intelligence and character that set them apart. Each entry was a testament to her determination to see the humanity in those whom society sought to dehumanize, and a silent rebellion against the injustice that defined her world. In the end, Virginia understood that she was bearing witness to something extraordinary, a lineage that defied the expectations of the society in which it existed, and a series of lives shaped by both oppression and remarkable resilience. The emerald eyes and golden hair were symbols, she realized, not just of a hidden father, but of the enduring spirit of the children and their mothers. In her careful documentation, Virginia found purpose. She was recording a truth that might otherwise be lost, preserving the memory of those whose lives were marked by both suffering and brilliance. And so, as the sun set over the sprawling fields of the plantation, casting long shadows across the cotton, Virginia Thornton continued her quiet vigil. She watched, she listened, and she wrote, determined that the children with emerald eyes and golden hair, children of one father whose actions had left an indelible mark, would not be forgotten. In the secrecy of her journal, she gave them names, stories, and dignity, crafting a legacy that would endure long after the oppressive system around them faded into history. Virginia knew that the truth she had uncovered was dangerous, perhaps even forbidden, but she also knew it was necessary. History, she realized, was not just about the powerful and the privileged. It was about those whose voices were silenced, whose lives were marginalized, and whose stories were hidden in plain sight. By witnessing and recording the lives of these extraordinary children, she became their guardian in spirit, ensuring that their existence, their beauty, and their resilience would be remembered for generations to come. As the weeks turned into months, Virginia's secret observances became more methodical. She began creating detailed sketches of the children, capturing not just their striking emerald eyes and golden hair, but the subtle nuances of their expressions, the faint arch of a brow, the curve of a smile, the way they tilted their heads when curious or cautious. She often stayed until the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the moss-covered oaks, sketching by the dim glow of a lantern, the pages of her journal growing thicker with every passing day. Her obsession was no longer merely curiosity, it had become a mission. She was determined to understand the lineage of these children and the true extent of the father's presence in their lives, even if it meant risking her own safety. One afternoon, Virginia ventured further into the quarters than she had ever dared before. She followed a narrow dirt path that wound past the storage sheds and the farthest cotton fields, arriving at a small cluster of cabins that had always seemed oddly secluded. Here she found more of the children, infants and toddlers alike, playing together under the watchful eyes of their mothers. Some noticed her immediately, their emerald eyes reflecting both fear and curiosity. Others returned to their play, seemingly unbothered by her presence. Virginia knelt to speak with them gently, offering a soft smile and quiet words. It was in these moments that Virginia began to notice something even more astonishing. The children did not simply share physical traits, they seemed to share mannerisms and temperaments as well. Some were fiercely independent, asserting themselves despite the constraints of the quarters. Others were remarkably patient, displaying an unusual calm that belied their tender ages. Virginia recorded everything with meticulous care, the way one child tilted her head when listening, the unique timbre of another's laughter, the subtle gestures that made each one distinct yet undeniably connected. The mothers, initially wary of Virginia's attention, gradually grew more trusting. Perhaps it was the innocence of her youth or the earnestness in her eyes, but they began to confide small details, sharing glimpses of the hardships they endured and the subtle ways they protected their children. Virginia learned of whispered warnings to each other, of secret measures to shield the children from prying eyes, and of careful monitoring of who approached them. These women, though enslaved, demonstrated a level of strategy and resilience that Virginia had not fully appreciated before. They were not powerless, they were fiercely protective of their blood and their legacy. Through these conversations, Virginia learned of the father. He was a man of considerable wealth and influence, the master of the plantation, and the source of both fear and silent resentment among the enslaved population. Though he never officially acknowledged the children, his presence loomed over the quarters in subtle ways, whispered warnings, furtive glances, and the occasional discreet reward or punishment. The mothers spoke of his visits in hushed tones, careful not to attract attention. The children, too young to fully comprehend the complexities of their situation, seemed to sense the weight of his authority, their behaviors subtly shaped by both fear and familiarity. Virginia's documentation took on a new urgency as she pieced together the scope of the father's influence. She began noting patterns of birth, tracing the emergence of the children over time. She discovered that the phenomenon was not random. The father had consistently fathered children with multiple women, leaving a hidden legacy that no official record captured. This revelation filled her with a mixture of awe and sorrow. The children were remarkable, but they were also products of exploitation, their existence entwined with the abuses of power that defined the plantation system. Despite the gravity of the situation, Virginia found moments of joy in her interactions with the children. She marveled at their intelligence, their curiosity, and their resilience. She taught them small lessons in reading and arithmetic, careful to keep her teaching secret. The children were eager learners there, minds sharp and receptive. Virginia realized that these children, though marginalized by their appearance and circumstance, possessed gifts that set them apart in a society that had long sought to suppress their potential. As her research progressed, Virginia began to consider the implications of her discoveries. She understood that revealing the truth publicly was impossible. The social and legal structures of the South were rigid and unforgiving. Exposing the father's actions would not only scandalize the plantation, but could also endanger her and the children. She began to formulate a plan to protect them, documenting everything with a precision that might allow future generations to understand the reality of their lives. Her journal became both a shield and a testament, capturing the humanity and individuality of the children in a way that official records could never do. One evening, Virginia noticed something peculiar in the behavior of one of the older children, a girl named Lillian in her journal. Lillian had always been cautious, observing the world with wide, emerald eyes that seemed to see far more than she should. That night, Lillian was particularly restless, pacing the cabin as if anticipating an unseen event. Virginia approached quietly, kneeling beside her and placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Lillian looked up, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. In a trembling voice, she whispered about a secret meeting of the mothers, a gathering where they discussed ways to protect their children from the father's scrutiny. Virginia listened intently, absorbing every word. The meeting, as Virginia would later document, revealed a complex network of resistance and protection. The mothers had developed signals to communicate with each other, coded gestures and phrases that allowed them to coordinate without attracting attention. They shared knowledge of the father's movements, rotated caregiving responsibilities to minimize risk, and employed subtle methods to disguise the children's distinctive features when necessary. Virginia was struck by the ingenuity and courage of these women. They were navigating impossible circumstances with intelligence and bravery, ensuring the survival and well-being of their children against overwhelming odds. As Virginia continued her observations, she noticed another remarkable pattern. The children often displayed abilities and interests that mirrored traits of their father, despite never having known him directly. Some showed a natural aptitude for leadership, others for strategy or observation. There was a subtle intelligence that set them apart from their peers, a combination of innate curiosity and inherited traits that manifested in ways both extraordinary and sometimes troubling. Virginia recorded these observations meticulously, aware that they were part of the hidden legacy of the father's influence. The realization weighed heavily on her. The children's gifts were undeniable, yet they were inseparable from the circumstances of their birth. Virginia felt a mixture of admiration and sorrow. Admiration for their resilience and capabilities, sorrow for the ways in which their lives had been shaped by exploitation and secrecy. She began to contemplate the broader implications of her findings, wondering how such a hidden lineage might impact the future of the plantation, the families involved, and society at large. Virginia also became increasingly aware of the social dynamics among the children themselves. The siblings, though connected by their shared features and lineage, often interacted in complex ways. Some were protective of one another, forming tight bonds that reflected both familial loyalty and shared experience. Others displayed rivalry or jealousy, subtle expressions of the tension inherent in a world where appearance and ability could determine status and treatment. Virginia observed these interactions with fascination, recording the details with the precision of a naturalist cataloging an extraordinary species. In her journal, Virginia noted not just the physical traits of the children, but the emotional and psychological landscapes they inhabited. She described the fear and curiosity that often coexisted, the moments of joy and play that punctuated their daily lives. and the quiet resilience that allowed them to navigate a world that was often unkind. Her entries became increasingly detailed, blending observation with empathy, creating a rich tapestry that captured both the external and internal realities of these remarkable children. One particularly striking discovery came when Virginia noticed that some of the younger children seemed to anticipate events or understand situations beyond their years. A boy named Thomas in her journal demonstrated an uncanny ability to read the moods and intentions of the adults around him, reacting with a combination of caution and cleverness that suggested both intelligence and inherited instinct. Virginia was both amazed and unsettled by this realization. The children's gifts were undeniable, but they were inextricably linked to the secrets and shadows of the plantation. As the year progressed, Virginia found herself increasingly invested in the lives of these children. She began creating detailed genealogical charts, mapping relationships, birth dates, and the subtle connections that linked the siblings. Each entry was carefully cross-referenced, ensuring accuracy and preserving the integrity of the information. Her work became both a personal obsession and a moral imperative. She understood that documenting these lives was an act of preservation, a way to honor the humanity and individuality of children who might otherwise be reduced to statistics or erased from memory. Despite the dangers, Virginia's determination never wavered. She continued to observe, to record, and to protect, often venturing into the quarters under the cover of early morning light or the fading glow of dusk. She learned to read the signs of the father's presence, anticipating his movements and helping the mothers shield their children from scrutiny. Each success reinforced her sense of purpose, and each narrow escape deepened her understanding of the precariousness of their lives. By the end of the second year, Virginia had amassed a substantial collection of journals, sketches, and observations. The children with emerald eyes and golden hair were no longer merely curiosities. They were living embodiments of a hidden history, a secret lineage that defied the conventions and constraints of the society around them. Virginia's work had transformed from simple curiosity into a carefully constructed record, a testament to the resilience, intelligence, and humanity of those who had been marginalized and silenced. Yet, even as she documented and protected them, Virginia understood that the challenges were far from over. The father's influence remained pervasive, and the social structures of the plantation continued to impose limitations and dangers. Each day brought new risks, new challenges, and new opportunities to witness both the brilliance and the vulnerability of these children. Virginia's vigilance became a defining feature of her life, a quiet commitment that would shape her understanding of morality, justice, and the power of observation. In the quiet hours, Virginia often reflected on the paradox of her discoveries. These children were extraordinary in ways that defied the expectations of their environment, yet they were also emblematic of its cruelty. Their emerald eyes and golden hair were not merely physical traits, they were symbols of resilience, intelligence, and survival, in a world designed to suppress their potential. Virginia's role as observer, protector, and chronicler became increasingly vital, a bridge between the hidden realities of the plantation and a future where their stories might be remembered. As the sun set over the cotton field, once more, casting long shadows across the quarters, Virginia closed her journal with a sense of both accomplishment and apprehension. The children slept nearby, unaware of the intricacies of their lineage or the magnitude of the secret they embodied. Virginia knew that she had only begun to uncover the full scope of their story, and that the years ahead would demand even greater courage, insight, and care. Yet she also knew that her work was meaningful, that in observing, recording, and protecting these children, she was bearing witness to a truth that society sought to conceal, and in doing so, preserving a legacy that would endure long after the sun set on the plantation. By the third year of her quiet investigation, Virginia Thornton had grown into a more deliberate and meticulous observer. The secret world she had discovered among the quarters of the plantation had deepened, and with it, her understanding of the lives she was chronicling. The children with emerald eyes and golden hair had grown older, their personalities blossoming in ways that reflected both the hardship of their environment and the hidden advantages of their unique lineage. Each child was distinct, yet together they formed a tapestry of traits that clearly pointed back to a single father, the master of the plantation, whose presence, though largely absent in their daily lives, loomed over them in ways both tangible and invisible. Virginia's role had shifted subtly but significantly. She was no longer just an observer, she had become a confidant, a quiet ally and a protector. The mothers of the children increasingly entrusted her with small details of their private lives, speaking in hushed tones about strategies to keep their offspring safe. Some mothers even confided the subtle signs the father left behind, the fleeting glances, the whispered commands to the overseers, the occasional favor or punishment, meted out selectively. Virginia recorded all of these with careful precision, knowing that the subtleties were as crucial as the obvious facts. Every gesture, every shadow, every overheard word could provide insight into the delicate balance the mothers maintained between obedience and resistance. One afternoon, Virginia witnessed a particularly striking scene that further crystallized her understanding. Two of the children, twins named Eleanor and Jacob in her journal, were playing near the edge of the woods that bordered the plantation. Eleanor was fearless, climbing a low branch of an oak tree with a confidence that seemed almost unnatural for a child of her age. Jacob followed cautiously, observing her movements, learning from her example, and carefully imitating her gestures. It was a small moment, a private tableau of childhood curiosity and boldness. Yet Virginia saw something profound in it. These children were learning, adapting, and surviving, in ways that went beyond the lessons taught in the quarters, or the limited interactions allowed by the masters. Their resilience was innate, yet it had been honed by circumstance and perhaps, Virginia mused, by the hidden influence of their father's traits. As she observed, Virginia began to consider the broader implications of her discoveries. The father, for all his authority, had unknowingly left a legacy that extended far beyond the plantation's immediate borders. These children, though marginalized in their current environment, were endowed with intelligence, curiosity, and physical attributes that could shape their destinies in ways society would never predict. Virginia's journal, once a simple record of observations, had transformed into a repository of hidden history, a chronicle not only of injustice and exploitation, but also of extraordinary resilience and potential. Her fascination was accompanied, however, by a growing sense of moral urgency. Virginia understood that the children's uniqueness made them both vulnerable and remarkable. Their striking features, their intelligence, and their innate abilities could provoke jealousy, fear, or curiosity among other enslaved people, overseers, and even members of her own family. She began to consider ways to subtly protect them without drawing attention to herself or jeopardizing their safety. She experimented with coded methods of communication, gestures, discreet signals, and small, seemingly inconsequential routines that allowed her to convey messages or provide guidance without anyone noticing. In essence, Virginia became a silent guardian, orchestrating a web of protection around the children even as she continued to observe and record their lives. It was during one of these discreet interventions that Virginia first encountered a challenge she had not anticipated: the emergence of the children's awareness of their own difference. As they grew older, some of the children began to notice their unique traits and the ways in which they were treated differently. A girl named Lillian, whose emerald eyes seemed to pierce through the very air around her, expressed curiosity about why her hair was lighter than that of the other children. She asked Virginia pointed questions, probing gently, searching for truths that no adult dared to reveal. Virginia realized that her role had expanded yet again, from observer and protector to a mentor and source of guidance. She needed to answer these questions carefully, providing enough information to satisfy curiosity while safeguarding the children from danger. Virginia chose her words carefully. She explained that families were sometimes complex, and that people could be alike in ways that were not immediately obvious. She emphasized the children's strengths, their intelligence, and their potential, encouraging them to see their uniqueness as a source of pride rather than fear. Over time, the children began to trust her, viewing her as an ally who understood their challenges and supported their growth. This bond deepened Virginia's sense of responsibility, and she committed herself even more fully to documenting their lives and ensuring their protection. As the seasons changed, Virginia began to notice another remarkable phenomenon. The children seemed to possess not only inherited physical traits, but also a shared temperament, an almost instinctive understanding of one another and the world around them. They coordinated play, solved problems cooperatively, and displayed empathy and intuition that exceeded what one might expect for their ages. Virginia recorded these observations in detail, noting patterns of leadership, problem-solving, and emotional intelligence that distinguished the children from their peers. She began to wonder if these traits were entirely inherited from their father, or if they were also shaped by the intense protective environment cultivated by their mothers and herself. Her curiosity eventually led her to investigate the father's past more deeply. She combed through letters, household accounts, and correspondence between neighboring plantations, seeking any hints that might shed light on his character, behaviors, or intentions. What she discovered was a portrait of a man both feared and revered, a figure whose authority extended beyond the plantation, and whose influence shaped the lives of those around him in subtle but profound ways. There was little evidence of paternal care in the conventional sense, but Virginia began to detect patterns in how he interacted with the enslaved families. He seemed to prefer certain traits, favoring intelligence, resilience, and obedience, qualities that manifested strikingly in the children he had fathered. This realization both troubled and fascinated Virginia. The father's presence was paradoxical, at once absent and yet undeniably influential. The children's development continued to astonish her. Jacob, for example, displayed an extraordinary ability to memorize patterns and sequences, recalling events with precision, and solving small problems with ingenuity. Eleanor demonstrated exceptional dexterity and coordination, excelling at tasks that required both physical skill and creative thinking. Lillian and the other girls exhibited keen social intelligence, understanding subtle dynamics among the children and adults alike. Virginia recorded these abilities with meticulous detail, often marveling at the ways in which the children surpassed her expectations. It was clear that they were extraordinary not merely in appearance but in intellect, emotional depth, and adaptability. However, Virginia was acutely aware of the precariousness of their situation. The father's authority was absolute, and even small deviations from the norm could provoke suspicion or punishment. She observed the children navigating these dangers with increasing sophistication, learning to hide their strengths, mask their curiosity, and comply outwardly, while maintaining inner resilience. Virginia documented these survival strategies, recognizing that they represented both innate intelligence and the influence of the protective networks surrounding them. In the quiet hours of the night, Virginia reflected on the broader implications of her findings. These children, products of exploitation, were also embodiments of resistance and resilience. Their unique traits, their intelligence, and their emotional awareness constituted a hidden legacy that defied the rigid social structures of the South. Virginia's journal became more than a record of observation. It became a testament to the potential of human beings to endure, adapt, and flourish, even under circumstances designed to suppress them. Her work also prompted her to consider the moral complexities of her own role. She was an observer, yes, but she was also complicit in a system that allowed such exploitation to continue. She grappled with feelings of guilt, responsibility, and the limitations of her influence. Yet she understood that her documentation and protection of the children represented one form of resistance, a quiet but meaningful intervention that preserved the humanity and dignity of those most vulnerable. As spring approached, Virginia faced a new challenge, the arrival of outsiders on the plantation. A distant relative of the family visited unexpectedly, accompanied by acquaintances who had never seen the quarters or the enslaved families up close. Virginia's careful monitoring of the children became critical. She had to ensure that their uniqueness did not draw attention, that their emerald eyes and golden hair remained unnoticed in the presence of strangers. She devised subtle strategies to obscure their features, redirect attention, and maintain the delicate balance of secrecy that had protected them for years. This period of heightened vigilance offered Virginia insight into the fragility of her efforts. One misstep could expose the children, jeopardizing their safety and undermining the trust that she had built with their mothers. The tension was palpable, but it also reinforced her determination. Virginia understood that secrecy was not merely a precaution, it was a moral imperative, a shield that allowed the children to develop, thrive, and maintain their dignity in a world that sought to deny both. By the end of the third year, Virginia's journal had become a remarkable compendium. It contained detailed sketches, genealogical charts, behavioral observations, and careful notes on the social dynamics of the quarters. She had documented not only the physical traits of the children but also their intellectual abilities, emotional development, and survival strategies. Each entry reflected her growing understanding of the complexity, resilience, and individuality of the children. as well as the courage and ingenuity of the mothers who protected them. Virginia realized that the hidden legacy of the father was far more significant than anyone could have imagined. The children were extraordinary not merely in appearance but in spirit, intelligence, and tragically. These lessons were disguised as games, but Virginia recognized their importance. By nurturing these skills, she hoped to give the children tools to protect themselves, both physically and socially. She was acutely aware that the father's presence, though often absent, was an invisible force shaping the environment. Every intervention, every lesson, was a small act of resistance against the limitations imposed upon them. As Virginia delved deeper into her observations, she noticed a change in the children's interactions. They had grown more conscious of their differences, sometimes responding with pride, sometimes with hesitation. Eleanor, ever bold, embraced her uniqueness openly, exploring her abilities with curiosity and confidence. Jacob, more reserved, often measured his actions carefully, observing the reactions of others before engaging fully. Lillian and the younger girls displayed a heightened awareness of social dynamics, their emerald eyes scanning for cues that would guide their behavior. Virginia documented these developments with painstaking detail, noting the ways in which the children balanced individuality with the necessity of caution. It was during one of these observation sessions that Virginia discovered a new layer to the father's influence. She had overheard a conversation between the master and an overseer, where subtle hints suggested that the father was aware of the children's traits and intelligence, yet chose to exercise his authority in a restrained manner. There were whispers of favoritism, small acts of indulgence, and occasional allowances that seemed to acknowledge the children's potential without drawing public attention. Virginia was both shocked and fascinated. The father, while still a figure of power and fear, was not entirely indifferent to the lives he had helped create. This complexity added a new dimension to her understanding, revealing a man capable of both cruelty and calculated consideration, whose choices continued to shape the children's existence. Virginia's journal entries became more reflective, blending observation with contemplation. She mused on the nature of legacy, power, and morality, recognizing that the children's lives were intertwined with forces beyond their control. The emerald eyes and golden hair were more than physical traits. They were markers of history, resilience, and the complex dynamics of human behavior. Virginia's role had evolved from mere chronicler to a guardian of both knowledge and morality, a position that demanded wisdom, courage, and discretion. The children, meanwhile, continued to develop extraordinary abilities. Eleanor demonstrated an uncanny aptitude for strategy, often leading games with a level of planning and foresight that amazed Virginia. Jacob exhibited remarkable memory and analytical skills, recalling events and details with precision that bordered on extraordinary. Lillian and the younger girls excelled in social intuition, understanding the unspoken rules of interaction and navigating them with skill and grace. Virginia was continually struck by the depth and breadth of their talents, noting how their environment, lineage, and early experiences had converged to produce a generation of children whose potential far exceeded that of their peers. Yet the beauty and brilliance of these children came with increasing challenges. Their uniqueness drew attention, and even the most subtle deviations from the expected norms of the quarters could spark suspicion. Virginia observed the delicate balancing act the mothers performed daily, shielding their children while teaching them to adapt, to blend in when necessary, and to assert themselves when safe. These strategies required coordination, trust, and constant vigilance. Virginia's presence provided an additional layer of protection, but she was acutely aware that the children's safety depended on more than her efforts alone. It relied on the collective ingenuity and resilience of everyone in the quarters. One particularly tense episode occurred when a visiting relative of the master commented on the unusual features of the children. The remark, casual though it was, sent a ripple of anxiety through the quarters. Virginia quickly assessed the situation, signaling the mothers to redirect attention and guiding the children into a game that would divert the visitors' focus. The intervention worked, but it underscored the ever-present danger of exposure. Virginia realized that as the children grew older and more aware of their own attributes, they might inadvertently draw attention, making her efforts to protect them even more critical. Amid these challenges, Virginia discovered moments of profound joy. She watched as the children played together, their laughter ringing through the quarters, their emerald eyes sparkling with delight. She saw their creativity, their intelligence, and their empathy in action, how they supported one another, solved problems collaboratively, and navigated their world with ingenuity. These moments reinforced her sense of purpose and deepened her emotional connection to the children. She documented each instance meticulously, capturing not only the events themselves but the subtle emotions and interactions that revealed the depth of their character. Virginia also began to reflect on the broader social implications of her discoveries. The father's legacy, while hidden, represented a challenge to the rigid hierarchies of the plantation. These children embodied traits and abilities that defied societal expectations, suggesting that intelligence, resilience, and individuality could emerge even in environments designed to suppress them. Virginia contemplated the ways in which their lives might influence future generations, imagining a world where such hidden legacies could reshape perceptions and challenge entrenched power structures. As the fourth year progressed, Virginia faced a new dimension of risk, the growing awareness of the children themselves. Eleanor, Jacob, and the others began to ask more direct questions about their origins, about why they were different, and about the man whose traits they seemed to share. Virginia approached these conversations with care, providing guidance and encouragement without revealing details that could endanger them. She emphasized their strengths, their intelligence, and their resilience, framing their uniqueness as a source of pride and potential, rather than danger. These conversations deepened the bond between Virginia and the children, transforming her role once again. She was no longer just an observer or protector, she was a mentor, a source of understanding, and a trusted confidant. The children looked to her for guidance, reassurance, and insight, and Virginia felt the weight of responsibility keenly. Every word, gesture, and lesson carried significance, shaping their understanding of themselves and the world around them. Virginia's journal entries reflected this evolving role. She wrote not only of the children's physical and intellectual traits, but also of their emotional development, social interactions, and emerging self-awareness. She documented the strategies the mothers employed to protect their offspring, the subtle influences of the father, and the ways in which the children adapted to their environment. Each entry was a careful balance of observation, empathy, and reflection, capturing the complexity of a hidden world that few others would ever understand. As the year drew to a close, Virginia recognized that her work had reached a critical point. The children were growing, more independent, more aware, and more capable of asserting themselves. Their uniqueness, once a secret confined to the quarters, was increasingly visible to anyone who chose to look closely. Virginia's vigilance remained essential, but she also began to prepare for a future in which the children might navigate the world without her constant guidance. She considered how to equip them with knowledge, skills, and strategies that would allow them to thrive while maintaining safety and dignity. In the quiet moments of reflection, Virginia pondered the extraordinary convergence of factors that had produced these children. The father's influence, the mother's ingenuity, the protective network within the quarters, and her own intervention had combined to create a hidden legacy of resilience, intelligence, and potential. The emerald eyes and golden hair were symbols, yes, but they also represented something deeper, the capacity of human beings to endure, adapt, and flourish, even under circumstances designed to suppress them. And so, as another sun set over the cotton fields, casting long shadows across the quarters, Virginia closed her journal with a sense of both accomplishment and apprehension. The children slept nearby, their breaths rising and falling in the dim light, unaware of the full scope of the legacy they carried. Virginia knew that the story was far from complete. Challenges lay ahead, dangers lurked in the periphery, and the complexities of their existence would continue to unfold. Yet she also knew that her efforts had mattered, that by observing, documenting, and guiding these extraordinary children, she had preserved a hidden history that demanded recognition, respect, and remembrance. In the secrecy of her journal and the quiet vigilance of her daily life, Virginia Thornton had become the guardian of a lineage unlike any other. A custodian of children whose emerald eyes and golden hair told a story of power, resilience, and human potential. And she understood that as long as she remained vigilant, their story, hidden, remarkable, and profoundly human, would endure, illuminating the complexities of a world in which beauty, intelligence, and courage often went unrecognized. By the 5th year, the children with emerald eyes and golden hair were no longer infants. They were growing into complex, intelligent beings, each with their own personality and presence. Virginia Thornton's role had shifted further from observer and protector to a near-parental figure, trusted implicitly by the mothers and increasingly looked to by the children themselves. Her journal had become a sacred record, meticulously cataloging the children's physical traits, temperaments, intellectual capacities, and the subtle ways in which they adapted to their environment. Every day brought new revelations, new challenges, and new glimpses into the hidden legacy of the father whose influence continued to ripple through the plantation in silent yet profound ways. The children had begun to notice patterns in their own lives and in the world around them. Eleanor, who had always been the boldest, now questioned the structure of the quarters and the rules imposed by the overseers. Jacob, methodical and observant, began to notice subtle differences in treatment between himself and other children, connecting these differences to their unique appearance. Lillian, ever intuitive, sensed the unspoken tensions in conversations and interactions with adults, recognizing signs of favoritism, caution, and subtle judgment. The awareness of their uniqueness was no longer a distant curiosity. It had become a central part of their understanding of the world. Virginia realized that this awareness was both a blessing and a danger. While the children's intelligence and intuition gave them advantages in navigating their environment, it also made them more visible to those who might exploit or punish them. One afternoon, she observed Eleanor speaking confidently to an overseer, using logic and reason to persuade him to allow a small act of independence in the yard. While Eleanor's reasoning was impressive, Virginia noted the risk. The overseer's response could have gone either way, and a misstep might have provoked suspicion or anger. This delicate balance underscored the precariousness of their existence, and Virginia knew she had to guide them carefully without stifling their natural abilities. The father's influence, though largely absent in daily life, was increasingly evident in the children's traits. Eleanor's boldness, Jacob's precision, and Lillian's social acuity seemed almost inherited, a subtle imprint of a man whose power had shaped the plantation for years. Virginia marveled at the resilience and sophistication of these children, realizing that their intelligence and resourcefulness were both a product of nature and nurture. She documented these traits in exhaustive detail, noting patterns of thought, emotional responses, and social behaviors. Each entry became a testament to the complexity and potential of these extraordinary children. The mothers remained vigilant, their strategies for protection becoming more intricate. They taught the children coded signals, hidden routines, and subtle methods to avoid drawing attention. Virginia observed these lessons, participating when appropriate and providing guidance in ways that ensured safety without interference. The network of protection was fragile yet resilient, a delicate web that relied on trust, intelligence, and coordination. Virginia marveled at the ingenuity of these women, recognizing that their efforts were essential to the children's survival and development. One day a situation arose that tested Virginia's vigilance and the children's growing awareness. A visiting planter, a man with a reputation for curiosity and gossip, arrived unexpectedly on the plantation. His attention was immediately drawn to the children, particularly those with the striking emerald eyes and golden hair. He asked questions about their origins, their mothers, and their development, his tone both casual and probing. Virginia's heart raced as she assessed the risk. She signaled the mothers to redirect the children's focus and intervened subtly, guiding the conversation and providing plausible explanations for any observations that might seem unusual. The incident highlighted the increasing challenges of secrecy. As the children grew older, their independence and awareness made it harder to shield them entirely from prying eyes. Virginia realized that she needed to equip them with skills not only to survive but to understand and navigate their world. She began introducing lessons in discretion, emotional intelligence, and subtle observation, teaching the children how to assess situations and respond appropriately. These lessons were disguised as games, puzzles, and stories, allowing the children to develop critical skills without raising suspicion. Virginia also noted the children's emotional development with keen interest. Eleanor displayed moments of frustration and defiance, testing boundaries and asserting her identity. Jacob experienced periods of self-doubt, questioning his place among the other children and the expectations imposed upon him. Lillian and the younger girls navigated complex social dynamics, balancing curiosity, caution, and empathy in ways that reflected both intelligence and adaptability. Virginia's journal captured these moments in detail, noting the interplay of personality, circumstance, and inherited traits. She recognized that understanding the emotional landscape of the children was as crucial as documenting their physical and intellectual development. The father's hidden legacy continued to manifest in subtle ways. Virginia observed instances where the children exhibited unexpected abilities, problem-solving skills, and insights that seemed to reflect traits of a man they had never met. Eleanor demonstrated strategic thinking in organizing games, Jacob recalled details and patterns with remarkable accuracy, and Lillian displayed an uncanny ability to anticipate social reactions. These abilities, remarkable even by the standards of adults, underscored the depth of the lineage and the complex interplay of inheritance, environment, and resilience. Virginia Beck. AME increasingly reflective about the moral implications of her observations. The children's uniqueness was both a gift and a vulnerability, and their lives were shaped by forces beyond their control. The father's influence, though unacknowledged publicly, had profound consequences, leaving a trail of extraordinary children whose existence challenged the rigid social hierarchy of the plantation. Virginia's role, though fraught with risk, was one of stewardship, observation, and moral responsibility. She recognized that her efforts were not merely about documentation but about protecting, guiding, and preserving a hidden history that might otherwise be lost. As the year progressed, the children began to explore their own abilities more fully. They experimented with problem-solving, creative expression, and social negotiation. Virginia observed these experiments with a mixture of pride and caution, recognizing both the potential and the risks inherent in their curiosity. She encouraged exploration while teaching caution, balancing the need for growth with the imperative of safety. Her journal reflected this dual focus, capturing both the brilliance of the children and the constraints imposed by their environment. The mothers continued to play a central role in the children's development. They provided guidance, protection, and emotional support, teaching strategies for survival, resilience, and adaptation. Virginia observed these lessons closely, noting the subtle interplay of authority, empathy, and intelligence. The mother's efforts were remarkable in their sophistication, reflecting a deep understanding of the social dynamics, risks, and opportunities within the plantation. Virginia documented these insights carefully, recognizing their importance in shaping the children's capacity to navigate a complex and often dangerous world. A particularly significant moment occurred when Eleanor confronted Virginia with questions about the father. Eleanor's emerald eyes were intense, her curiosity unrelenting. She asked why her hair and eyes were different, why she seemed to share traits with siblings born to other mothers, and whether the man she had never met had a role in their lives. Virginia responded with care, emphasizing the children's strengths, intelligence, and resilience, while avoiding specifics that could expose them to risk. She framed their uniqueness as a source of potential and pride, teaching Eleanor to understand her heritage without compromising safety. This conversation marked a turning point. The children were no longer passive participants in their lives, they were becoming aware of their identities, their abilities, and the implications of their lineage. Virginia recognized the importance of guiding this awareness, balancing empowerment with discretion, and fostering resilience in ways that would allow the children to thrive despite the limitations imposed upon them. By the end of the 5th year, Virginia's journal had grown into a comprehensive record of extraordinary detail. It included genealogical charts, behavioral observations, sketches, and reflective essays on the moral and social implications of the children's lives. The journal was both a historical document and a practical guide, capturing the complexity, intelligence, and resilience of the children while providing strategies for their continued protection and development. Virginia understood that her work was far from complete. The children's growth, awareness, and independence would continue to present challenges, and the hidden legacy of the father would shape their experiences in unpredictable ways. Yet she also recognized the profound significance of her efforts. By observing, documenting, and guiding the children, she was preserving a hidden history, safeguarding extraordinary lives, and ensuring that the remarkable lineage of emerald eyes and golden hair would endure despite the constraints of their environment. In the quiet of the evening, Virginia often reflected on the convergence of forces that had brought her to this role. The father's influence, the ingenuity and resilience of the mothers, and her own vigilance and empathy had created a unique constellation of protection and development for the children. The emerald eyes and golden hair were more than physical traits. They were symbols of hidden potential, resilience, and the enduring capacity of human beings to adapt, survive, and flourish in the face of adversity. As the sun set over the plantation, casting long shadows across the cotton fields, Virginia closed her journal with a mixture of satisfaction and apprehension. The children slept nearby, their minds quietly processing the lessons, observations, and experiences of the day. Virginia knew that the story of their lives was ongoing, filled with challenges, discoveries, and moments of wonder. Yet she also knew that her work, her careful observation, guidance, and documentation, had ensured that the hidden legacy of emerald eyes and golden hair would not be forgotten. Through her vigilance, Virginia had become the guardian of extraordinary lives, a custodian of knowledge, and a chronicler of resilience. The children's stories, marked by brilliance, vulnerability, and the hidden influence of a powerful father, were preserved in her journal with care and empathy. Virginia understood that history often overlooked those who lived in the shadows, but she was determined that these extraordinary children would be remembered, their lives acknowledged, and their potential honored for generations to come. By the 6th year, the children with emerald eyes and golden hair had grown into a stage of awareness and sophistication that far surpassed what Virginia Thornton had initially imagined. No longer the wide-eyed infants she had first observed, they had begun to grasp the contours of their existence, the delicate balance between visibility and secrecy, and the extraordinary legacy that bound them together. Virginia's role had evolved again, from observer and mentor to a central figure in the silent orchestration of their safety, education, and emotional development. Her journal had become not only a meticulous record, but also a guide for survival, a repository of hidden knowledge, and a testament to the resilience of human beings shaped by circumstances both cruel and extraordinary. The plantation itself seemed to shift around her. Overseers became more vigilant, neighbors grew more curious, and even some members of Virginia's own family began to notice the unusual traits of the children. Though none voiced their suspicions outright, Virginia sensed the subtle glances, the hushed comments, and the questions that lingered just beneath polite conversation. The stakes were higher than ever. The children's unique appearance, the striking emerald eyes and golden hair, was both a blessing and a liability. Their talents, intelligence, and social acuity set them apart in ways that could provoke admiration or suspicion, and Virginia knew that a single misstep could unravel years of careful protection. One particularly tense day, Virginia observed an incident that highlighted the precariousness of their situation. The master of the plantation, a man both feared and respected, had returned unexpectedly from a journey. His presence in the quarters caused a ripple of tension among the enslaved, the mothers, and even the children themselves. Eleanor, bold as ever, had been exploring near the edge of the yard when the master's sudden approach startled her. Jacob, perceptive and cautious, immediately recognized the danger and guided Eleanor to step aside, while Lillian and the younger girls followed instinctively, adhering to a protocol they had practiced under Virginia's guidance. Virginia intervened subtly, using small gestures to signal the children to remain calm and redirect attention. She observed the master's scrutiny, noting the fleeting moments of curiosity in his gaze as he passed. Though he said nothing overtly, Virginia could sense that he had noticed the children's unusual traits. Her heart pounded as she ensured that no misstep betrayed the secret that had been painstakingly maintained for years. This incident underscored the delicate equilibrium of visibility and secrecy upon which the children's safety depended, and it reinforced Virginia's understanding of her critical role. In the weeks that followed, Virginia focused on further developing the children's abilities in ways that enhanced both their resilience and discretion. She devised exercises to improve their memory, critical thinking, and observational skills, often framing them as games to maintain engagement, while cultivating essential survival skills. Eleanor thrived in challenges that required strategic planning, Jacob excelled in problem-solving and pattern recognition, and Lillian and the younger girls honed their social intuition, learning to read subtle cues and anticipate reactions. Virginia documented every success, every misstep, and every insight, building a detailed record of the children's capabilities that would serve as both historical documentation and a practical guide for their continued development. The mothers continued to play a vital role, teaching lessons in protection, discretion, and emotional intelligence. They conveyed subtle warnings about outsiders, trained the children in coded signals, and reinforced the importance of careful observation. Virginia watched and learned from their methods, integrating their wisdom into her own strategies. The collaboration between Virginia and the mothers created a powerful network of support that allowed the children to thrive despite the constraints imposed by the plantation system. As the year progressed, Virginia observed a new dynamic emerging among the children themselves. The older ones, particularly Eleanor and Jacob, began to take on informal leadership roles, guiding their younger siblings in play, social interactions, and problem-solving exercises. These leadership traits were unmistakably influenced by the father's legacy, an inherited capacity for strategy, influence, and insight that seemed to manifest in the children naturally. Virginia documented these developments meticulously, noting the ways in which the children learned from one another and from the environment, internalizing lessons that would serve them well both now and in the future. Virginia also began to notice subtle changes in the children's emotional responses. They displayed heightened sensitivity to the moods of adults, an intuitive understanding of social hierarchies, and an ability to anticipate outcomes in complex interactions. These traits, while remarkable, carried inherent risks. A misjudged glance, a misinterpreted remark, or a bold act could draw attention, and Virginia knew that teaching the children to temper their instincts with caution was essential for their continued safety. She created exercises and role-playing scenarios that allowed the children to practice these skills, blending instruction with engagement in ways that reinforced both competence and caution. The hidden influence of the father became increasingly apparent. Virginia observed that certain traits, strategic thinking, emotional acuity, resilience, and a natural confidence, appeared consistently across the children, despite differences in age and maternal lineage. These traits manifested not only in cognitive abilities but also in social interactions, emotional regulation, and adaptability. Virginia reflected on the paradoxical nature of this legacy. The father's actions had created children whose lives were deeply constrained, yet whose innate qualities allowed them to navigate their environment with sophistication and subtle power. She documented these patterns in exhaustive detail, noting both individual variations and overarching trends. One particularly enlightening moment occurred during an impromptu play session. Eleanor had devised a complex game that required coordination, planning, and foresight, directing her siblings with authority and clarity. Jacob observed closely, making adjustments and offering solutions that complemented Eleanor's strategy, while Lillian and the younger children contributed in ways that demonstrated empathy, intuition, and creativity. Virginia watched in awe, recognizing the interplay of inherited traits, learned behaviors, and environmental influence. She recorded the session in her journal, capturing not only the events themselves, but the subtle social and cognitive dynamics that revealed the depth of the children's capabilities. Despite these successes, challenges persisted. The children's uniqueness remained a source of potential exposure, and the stakes of visibility grew with their increasing independence and awareness. Virginia continued to develop strategies to mitigate risk, including careful scheduling of interactions, monitoring of outsider presence, and reinforcement of protective routines. She remained vigilant, aware that even a small lapse could have far-reaching consequences for the children and the network of mothers and allies who supported them. The children's growing curiosity about their origins became more pronounced. Eleanor, in particular, asked direct questions about the father, the reasons for their unique traits, and the patterns she observed among her siblings. Virginia approached these conversations with caution, emphasizing strengths, resilience, and intelligence while carefully avoiding details that could endanger them. She framed their uniqueness as a gift, teaching them to understand and value their abilities while remaining mindful of the social realities that constrained them. These discussions deepened the children's self-awareness and sense of identity, reinforcing both confidence and discretion. Virginia's journal reflected an evolving philosophy. She began to consider the broader implications of the father's legacy, the resilience of the children, and the ingenuity of the mothers who protected them. The children's lives were not merely shaped by genetics or environment. They were a product of complex interactions between inherited traits, social intelligence, and carefully cultivated protection. Virginia recognized that her role was both historical and moral, documenting a hidden narrative while actively shaping the development and survival of a remarkable generation. One afternoon, Virginia observed a moment of profound insight. Jacob had noticed a subtle pattern in the overseer's behavior, and quietly shared his observations with Eleanor and Lillian. Together the children formulated a plan to avoid potential exposure, using coded signals and strategic positioning to minimize risk. Virginia watched, amazed by their capacity for analysis, coordination, and foresight. She recorded the event in detail, noting both the ingenuity of the children and the subtle inheritance of traits that connected them to their father. As the 6th year drew to a close, Virginia recognized the cumulative significance of her work. The children's development, resilience, and intelligence had reached a level that demanded not only observation but active guidance. Her role as chronicler, protector, and mentor had expanded to encompass strategic oversight, moral stewardship, and emotional support. She understood that the legacy of emerald eyes and golden hair was more than a physical trait. It was a manifestation of resilience, intelligence, and adaptability that transcended the constraints of the plantation system. In the quiet hours of the evening, Virginia reflected on the convergence of forces that had shaped this hidden world. The father's influence, though largely unseen, had created extraordinary potential. The mother's ingenuity and protective strategies had safeguarded that potential, and Virginia's vigilance, guidance, and documentation had ensured that the children could thrive within their constraints. The emerald eyes and golden hair were symbols, yes, but they were also markers of resilience, intelligence, and the capacity for survival against overwhelming odds. Virginia closed her journal with a sense of both accomplishment and apprehension. The children slept nearby, their breaths rising and falling rhythmically, unaware of the full scope of the legacy they carried. Virginia understood that the story of their lives was ongoing, filled with challenges, discoveries, and moments of wonder. Yet she also knew that her meticulous efforts, her observations, guidance, and interventions had preserved a hidden history that demanded recognition, respect, and remembrance. Through her vigilance, Virginia had become the custodian of an extraordinary lineage, a guardian of lives that combined brilliance, resilience, and vulnerability. The children's emerald eyes and golden hair were more than physical attributes. They were symbols of hidden potential, the enduring strength of human beings, and the quiet power of observation and protection. Virginia understood that as long as she remained vigilant, their story, remarkable, hidden, and profoundly human, would endure, a testament to resilience, ingenuity, and the capacity to flourish even under the harshest circumstances. By the 7th year, Virginia Thornton's world had become an intricate web of observation, protection, and mentorship. The children with emerald eyes and golden hair were no longer simply remarkable infants or precocious toddlers. They had become perceptive, intelligent, and increasingly aware of both their uniqueness and the dangers inherent in their environment. Virginia's role had grown more complex. She was a chronicler of hidden histories, a guardian against exposure, and a subtle instructor in survival, discretion, and resilience. Her journal, once a simple record of observations, had become a comprehensive testament to the lives of children who existed in the shadow of secrecy, brilliance, and extraordinary potential. The plantation itself had grown more scrutinized over time. Outsiders, relatives, visitors, and occasional officials traveled through, and Virginia learned to anticipate their movements, moods, and curiosity. Each visit presented a potential risk to the children, whose striking features, the golden hair and emerald eyes, could not easily be concealed. Virginia developed increasingly sophisticated strategies for mitigation. She coordinated with the mothers to redirect attention, created subtle distractions, and subtly guided the children to act in ways that would both protect them and allow them to maintain their autonomy and confidence. One afternoon, a particularly tense incident occurred. A wealthy relative from a neighboring plantation arrived unexpectedly, accompanied by acquaintances known for their curiosity about the lives of the enslaved. The visitor's eyes immediately fell upon the children, and Virginia's pulse quickened. Eleanor, who had always been bold, instinctively straightened, while Jacob observed the visitors, calculating the safest response. Lillian and the younger girls paused, reading the subtle signals of caution that Virginia had instilled in them. Virginia acted swiftly, using a combination of gestures, subtle vocal cues, and coordinated distractions to redirect the children's attention and maintain the appearance of normalcy. She guided the conversation with the visitors, offering plausible explanations for any observations they might have found unusual, all while maintaining a calm exterior. The incident was a stark reminder of the ever-present danger their uniqueness posed and reinforced the need for constant vigilance and careful guidance. Despite the constant need for discretion, Virginia was continually struck by the extraordinary capabilities of the children. Eleanor had developed a remarkable ability to assess situations and make strategic decisions, often anticipating potential dangers before they became apparent. Jacob's analytical skills had grown sharper, allowing him to detect patterns, remember details, and solve problems with astonishing efficiency. Lillian and the younger girls exhibited extraordinary social intelligence, navigating complex interactions with both peers and adults in ways that demonstrated empathy, insight, and adaptability. Virginia documented these developments in meticulous detail, recognizing that their abilities were the living manifestation of a hidden legacy that combined both nature and nurture. The mothers continued to play a critical role in the children's development. They taught lessons in emotional intelligence, resilience, and subtle forms of resistance, often using coded signals and small routines to communicate safety instructions. Virginia observed and learned from these strategies, integrating them into her own methods and ensuring that the children were equipped with both practical skills and moral guidance. The collaboration between Virginia and the mothers had created a protective network that allowed the children to thrive in an environment that was both restrictive and unpredictable. As the children grew, they began to show a deeper awareness of their lineage and the influence of their father, the master whose presence was both largely absent and profoundly impactful. Eleanor, perceptive and inquisitive, asked direct questions about the patterns she observed in herself and her siblings. Jacob began to notice similarities among the children that could not be explained by chance, while Lillian expressed curiosity about the social dynamics that governed their lives. Virginia approached these conversations with caution, offering guidance and encouragement while carefully avoiding details that might compromise their safety. She emphasized their strengths, intelligence, and potential, framing their uniqueness as a source of pride, rather than a liability. Virginia also began to notice the subtle ways in which the children's intelligence and emotional awareness interacted with the environment. They were capable of anticipating reactions, negotiating social interactions, and navigating complex scenarios with a level of sophistication that far exceeded their age. Eleanor, in particular, demonstrated a natural ability to lead and organize, often devising strategies that required cooperation, foresight, and adaptability. Jacob's memory and analytical skills allowed him to complement Eleanor's leadership, while Lillian and the younger girls contributed insights and solutions that demonstrated empathy and creativity. Virginia meticulously recorded these dynamics, understanding that they revealed not only inherited traits, but also the results of careful guidance and protective mentorship. However, the increasing independence and awareness of the children brought new challenges. Their curiosity and boldness occasionally led to behaviors that risked exposure. Virginia observed moments of impulsivity, subtle acts of defiance, and questioning of authority, all natural in children but potentially dangerous in the context of the plantation. She responded by intensifying their lessons in discretion, teaching them how to evaluate situations, assess risk, and act with both intelligence and caution. These exercises became a blend of mentorship, strategic training, and moral guidance, helping the children to balance autonomy with survival. The hidden influence of the father remained a pervasive presence in Virginia's observations. She noted that certain traits, strategic thinking, emotional acuity, resilience, and confidence, appeared consistently among the children, transcending age differences and maternal lineage. These traits were evident in social interactions, problem-solving abilities, and emotional regulation. Virginia reflected on the paradoxical nature of this legacy. The father's actions had created children whose lives were constrained by societal structures. He endowed them with extraordinary capacities that allowed them to navigate their environment with sophistication and subtle power. She documented these patterns extensively, emphasizing both their uniqueness and their implications for the children's future potential. One particularly revealing incident occurred during a routine chore in the quarters. Eleanor and Jacob, working together, devised a system to complete tasks more efficiently while minimizing the risk of drawing attention from overseers. They communicated using subtle gestures, anticipated each other's actions, and coordinated efforts in a way that demonstrated both intelligence and inherited aptitude. Lillian and the younger girls observed and contributed insights, adjusting their approach based on social cues and environmental observations. Virginia recorded the episode in detail, noting how inherited traits, learned behaviors, and environmental influences converged to produce a remarkable display of cognitive and social sophistication. Virginia also reflected on the moral complexities of her role. She was both an observer and an active participant, guiding, protecting, and shaping the children's experiences, while documenting their extraordinary development. The children's uniqueness was a product of exploitation, yet it had also produced remarkable potential. Virginia grappled with feelings of responsibility, ethical obligation, and the limitations of her influence. She recognized that her work was both historical and moral, preserving a hidden narrative while actively shaping the lives of extraordinary children. The mothers remained vigilant in their protective strategies, reinforcing lessons in discretion, emotional regulation, and situational awareness. They shared knowledge of potential threats, coordinated caregiving, and ensured that the children's abilities were developed safely. Virginia observed these strategies carefully, incorporating them into her own interventions and ensuring that the children were equipped with both practical skills and moral guidance. The network of mothers and allies provided a framework within which the children could thrive, balancing autonomy, intelligence, and safety. As the seventh year drew to a close, Virginia recognized that the children were entering a new phase of development. Their awareness, independence, and capabilities had reached a level that demanded even greater guidance, strategic oversight, and emotional support. The hidden legacy of the father was increasingly visible in their interactions, problem-solving abilities, and social intelligence, while the protective network of mothers in Virginia remained essential to their continued safety. Virginia's journal had grown into a comprehensive chronicle, documenting not only the children's physical and intellectual traits, but also the subtle moral, emotional, and social dynamics that defined their lives. In the quiet moments of reflection, Virginia considered the extraordinary convergence of factors that had shaped this hidden world. The father's influence, though largely unseen, had endowed the children with remarkable abilities. The mother's ingenuity and protective strategies had safeguarded these abilities, while Virginia's vigilance and guidance had ensured their development and safety. The emerald eyes and golden hair were not merely physical traits, they were markers of resilience, intelligence, and potential, symbols of a lineage that defied the constraints of the plantation system. Virginia's sense of responsibility grew with each passing day. She understood that her work was more than observation, it was stewardship, mentorship, and moral intervention. The children's lives were shaped by forces beyond their control, yet through careful guidance, protection, and education, they were learning to navigate their world with intelligence, courage, and subtle power. Virginia recognized that the story of their lives, extraordinary, hidden, and profoundly who, was one that demanded careful preservation and thoughtful documentation. In the final weeks of the seventh year, a series of subtle events reinforced the urgency of her mission. New overseers arrived, unfamiliar with the hidden dynamics of the quarters. A visiting relative displayed an unusual interest in the children, asking indirect questions that suggested heightened curiosity. Virginia responded with calm precision, coordinating the children, the mothers, and her own interventions to maintain safety. She noted every detail in her journal, understanding that the careful documentation of these episodes was essential not only for historical preservation, but also for practical guidance in protecting the children in the future. Through these challenges, Virginia observed remarkable moments of brilliance and empathy among the children. Eleanor demonstrated strategic foresight in coordinating activities, Jacob exhibited analytical precision in problem-solving, and Lillian and the younger girls showed keen social intelligence in navigating complex interactions. Virginia recorded these abilities with a mix of awe and scholarly precision, noting the interplay of inherited traits, environmental influence, and guided mentorship. She understood that the children were extraordinary not only in appearance but in intellect, social aptitude, and emotional resilience, a combination that made their survival and development both delicate and remarkable. By the end of the seventh year, Virginia closed her journal with a sense of accomplishment, vigilance, and reflection. The children slept nearby, their emerald eyes closed in the quiet of the evening, unaware of the depth of the legacy they carried and the intricate network of protection that surrounded them. Virginia understood that the story of their lives was ongoing, filled with challenges, discoveries, and extraordinary moments of insight and resilience. She also recognized that her careful observation, guidance, and documentation had preserved a hidden history that might otherwise have been lost. In the secret chronicle of her journal, Virginia Thornton had become more than an observer. She was a custodian of extraordinary lives, a guardian of hidden potential, and a chronicler of resilience. The children's emerald eyes and golden hair were symbols of brilliance, vulnerability, and human potential. And through her vigilance and mentorship, their stories were preserved, a testament to the enduring power of intelligence, courage, and empathy in the face of overwhelming constraints. By the 8th year, the children with emerald eyes and golden hair had grown into beings whose presence was impossible to ignore. Yet their uniqueness remained cloaked in the careful strategies Virginia Thornton and the mothers had cultivated over the years. No longer toddlers or curious children, they were now approaching an age where their intelligence, awareness, and resilience could rival that of adults in subtle ways. Virginia had become more than an observer or mentor. She was the silent architect of their safety, a custodian of their lineage, and a chronicler of a hidden history that had unfolded in the shadows of the plantation. Her journal, thick with meticulous notes, sketches, and reflections, had become a living testament to human resilience, extraordinary intellect, and the quiet power of secrecy. The plantation itself had grown more complex. Outsiders' curiosity had intensified, with relatives, neighbors, and occasional officials passing through, unaware of the intricate network of observation and protection that governed the quarters. Virginia had grown adept at anticipating potential threats, guiding the children in both behavior and subtle interactions, and maintaining a balance between autonomy and concealment. Each child had learned to navigate this environment with grace, blending inherited traits, learned behaviors, and practical strategies in a seamless, almost instinctive manner. Eleanor had become a natural strategist, using her intelligence and foresight to guide her siblings. Jacob's analytical skills had grown to remarkable heights, allowing him to detect patterns and solve problems with uncanny precision. Lillian and the younger girls had developed extraordinary social intuition, anticipating the moods and intentions of adults and peers alike. Virginia observed these abilities with a mixture of pride, awe, and protective caution, documenting each moment with the understanding that these records were both historical testimony and a practical guide to survival. The mothers continued to serve as the foundation of protection, reinforcing lessons in discretion, emotional intelligence, and social navigation. They taught the children to interpret subtle signals, assess risk, and respond strategically, ensuring that the children's exceptional abilities did not expose them to danger. Virginia worked alongside them, coordinating routines, monitoring the environment, and providing guidance in ways that were often invisible to others. The combination of maternal wisdom and Virginia's vigilance created a protective web around the children, allowing them to thrive in conditions designed to suppress their potential. As the children approached adolescence, their awareness of their own uniqueness deepened. Eleanor began to question the reasons for her distinct appearance, the patterns she observed among her siblings, and the silent influence of the father whose traits they all shared. Jacob observed similarities and differences with growing analytical rigor, while Lillian expressed empathy and curiosity about social dynamics that reflected both inherited and learned intelligence. Virginia approached these conversations with the care and subtlety that had become her hallmark, framing the children's uniqueness as a source of pride and potential, while carefully omitting details that might endanger them. During one particularly revealing afternoon, Virginia witnessed a moment that crystallized the extraordinary convergence of nature, nurture, and mentorship. The children had devised a complex task, combining elements of strategy, memory, and social coordination. Eleanor led the initiative with authority and foresight. Jacob offered precise calculations and analysis, and Lillian and the younger girls contributed insights that demonstrated both empathy and creativity. Virginia observed quietly, noting how the children's abilities complemented one another, revealing the hidden inheritance of the father alongside the careful guidance of their mothers and herself. She recorded every detail, understanding that this interplay of traits was the essence of the hidden legacy she had been preserving for 8 years. Yet, as remarkable as the children were, the challenges of visibility and risk had grown more pressing. Outsiders' curiosity could not always be contained, and the children's boldness, intelligence, and charisma made them increasingly noticeable. Virginia intensified her efforts to ensure that their talents were nurtured safely, teaching them strategies for subtlety, observation, and emotional regulation. She devised exercises that combined learning with play, fostering resilience and adaptability while reinforcing the necessity of discretion. The father's presence, though largely absent in daily life, remained a potent undercurrent in Virginia's observations. Traits such as strategic thinking, emotional acuity, resilience, and leadership continued to manifest in the children with remarkable consistency. Virginia reflected on the paradox of this inheritance. The father's influence had created children whose lives were constrained by social and racial hierarchies, yet endowed them with exceptional capacities that allowed them to navigate their environment with subtle authority and insight. She documented these patterns meticulously, emphasizing both their uniqueness and the broader implications for understanding human potential and resilience under extreme conditions. A turning point arrived when Eleanor, fully aware of her abilities, began to take a more active role in guiding the group. She implemented strategies for coordination, problem-solving, and risk assessment that reflected both inherited intelligence and lessons learned from Virginia and the mothers. Jacob provided analytical support, calculating outcomes, and identifying potential challenges. Lillian and the younger girls contributed emotional insight, anticipating reactions and facilitating communication. Virginia watched with quiet pride, realizing that the children were now capable of orchestrating their own safety and growth with remarkable sophistication. This growing independence brought new moral and practical considerations. Virginia recognized that the children's abilities could not remain hidden indefinitely, and she began to contemplate future possibilities, how their intelligence, social acumen, and resilience might allow them to influence the world beyond the plantation. She considered avenues for education, subtle empowerment, and eventual freedom, always mindful of the dangers posed by exposure and societal restrictions. Her journal reflected these considerations, blending observation, guidance, and philosophical reflection on human potential and the morality of her interventions. During this period, the mother's role remained central. They taught the children subtle forms of resistance, emotional regulation, and social navigation that were critical for survival. Virginia observed these interactions carefully, reinforcing strategies, providing mentorship, and documenting the complex dynamics at play. The collaboration between Virginia and the mothers had matured into a highly effective system of protection and education, ensuring that the children's exceptional abilities could be nurtured safely and effectively. The culmination of the 8th year brought a series of events that tested every aspect of Virginia's strategy in the children's development. A visiting planter, unusually perceptive and inquisitive, spent an extended period on the plantation, observing the quarters and questioning the mothers. Eleanor, Jacob, Lillian, and the younger girls applied the skills they had learned over years of training: subtle signaling, careful observation, and strategic interaction. Virginia orchestrated interventions from behind the scenes, coordinating movements, distractions, and explanations to prevent exposure. The children navigated the situation with remarkable poise and intelligence, demonstrating the culmination of years of inheritance, mentorship, and protection. Through these challenges, Virginia witnessed the full manifestation of the father's hidden legacy. The children displayed extraordinary intelligence, social acuity, and emotional resilience, reflecting the combined effects of genetic inheritance, environmental influence, and careful guidance. Eleanor's strategic thinking, Jacob's analytical precision, and Lillian and the younger girl's social intuition allowed them to navigate complex social interactions with sophistication and subtle authority. Virginia documented every detail, understanding that the journal now represented both a historical record and a practical guide for the children's continued survival and empowerment. As the year drew to a close, Virginia reflected on the remarkable convergence of forces that had shaped the children's lives. The father's influence, the mother's ingenuity, and her own vigilance had combined to create a generation of children whose uniqueness was both a gift and a challenge. The emerald eyes and golden hair were symbols of resilience, intelligence, and potential, markers of a lineage that defied societal constraints. Virginia recognized that the children's abilities, intellectual, emotional, and social, were the living embodiment of a hidden history that demanded preservation, understanding, and respect. In the quiet of the evening, Virginia closed her journal with a mixture of satisfaction, apprehension, and awe. The children slept nearby, their emerald eyes closed, yet the depth of their inheritance and the potential of their minds were palpable even in repose. Virginia understood that their story was ongoing, filled with challenges, discoveries, and extraordinary potential. Her meticulous observation, mentorship, and protection had ensured that this hidden history, extraordinary, delicate, and profoundly human, would endure. Virginia had become more than a chronicler. She was the guardian of an exceptional lineage, a mentor shaping the growth and resilience of extraordinary children, and the custodian of a history that would otherwise have remained unseen. The children's emerald eyes and golden hair were not merely physical attributes, they were emblems of hidden potential, resilience, and intelligence, symbols of the capacity to thrive even under conditions designed to suppress it. The final months of the 8th year brought moments of profound insight. The children, now capable of understanding the complexities of their lives, began to demonstrate independent initiative. They devised strategies for learning, problem-solving, and social negotiation that reflected both inherited traits and the lessons imparted by Virginia and the mothers. Eleanor's leadership, Jacob's analytical reasoning, and Lillian and the younger girl's social intuition converged in a display of extraordinary capability. Virginia observed quietly, documenting these achievements and reflecting on the moral and historical significance of the hidden legacy. By the end of the 8th year, Virginia recognized that the children's development represented the culmination of 8 years of careful observation, protection, and guidance. Their emerald eyes and golden hair, once markers of vulnerability and curiosity, had become symbols of resilience, intellect, and the quiet power of inheritance. Virginia's journal, filled with observations, strategies, reflections, and sketches, stood as a testament to their extraordinary lives. The mother's ingenuity, and the hidden influence of the father whose legacy had shaped them. In the stillness of the plantation at night, Virginia reflected on the journey she'd undertaken. From her initial curiosity to the complex orchestration of safety, mentorship, and documentation, she had become inseparable from the story she chronicled. The children, extraordinary in every sense, embodied resilience, intelligence, and potential that transcended the limitations of their environment. Virginia understood that the hidden history she had preserved would endure, illuminating the extraordinary lives of children born into secrecy, brilliance, and resilience. As the candlelight flickered across her journal pages, Virginia realized that the story was more than a record of events. It was a testament to human potential, the ingenuity of those who protect the vulnerable, and the quiet persistence of resilience in the face of oppression. The children with emerald eyes and golden hair had become more than anomalies. They were living symbols of a lineage, a hidden legacy that would shape the world in subtle but profound ways. Virginia closed her journal one last time for the year, knowing that while the chapters of the children's lives were still unfolding, their story, hidden, extraordinary, and enduring, would never be forgotten.